Hello and welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today we continue our Best Picture Rewind series with a review for Casablanca. It is a full house today as Hilary White, Jakub Flasz, and Nicolò Grasso all join the show to discuss this iconic Best Picture winner. When you think of films that have won Best Picture, Casablanca is one of the biggest titles to actually win that award. A classic war story about taking agency to fight against oppression and fight against fascism. You know this film, likely you love this film, and today we get to discuss all things Casablanca. Is this a classic revisiting the film that actually holds up to the expectations and legacy that the film has earned? Or is this a film that may be slightly overrated? We put it against the Best Picture scorecard and discuss the film as a Best Picture winner and continue our journey as we head towards Oscars 100. Thank you so much for watching, listening, and supporting the show. And without further ado, let's get to our Best Picture Rewind episode on Casablanca. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. A full house today to discuss Casablanca as we continue our Best Picture Rewind series leading to the 100th Academy Awards. Here we sit today at the 16th Academy Awards. If you're following along with the series, this is our 4th episode in the series. We did a pretty big jump here. We jumped 7 years. So in that time, we've had The Life of Emile Zola, You Can't Take It With You, Gone with the Wind, Rebecca, How Green Was My Valley, and Mr. Minver all win Best Picture. So we've jumped 7 years, 1944, March 2nd, the 16th Academy Awards, hosted by Jack Benary from the Grom's Chinese Theater in Hollywood. Pretty interesting to note that this is the last year we're going to have 10 Best Picture nominations until 2009. I think for a lot of new people who feel like, oh my gosh, 10 is not even enough to capture like the best films of the year now, for decades and decades and decades, you only had 5 nominees, which looking back feels insane. But for this year, the nominees were Casablanca, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Heaven Can Wait, The Human Comedy, In Which We Serve, Madame Curie, The More the Merrier, The Oxbow Incident, The Song of Bernadette, and Watch on the Rhine. The most nominations and wins both went to The Song of Bernadette that got 12 nominations. It won 4 awards. The current record, for anyone just curious keeping up with that, right now, Gone with the Wind, which I think we're all probably huge stands of, that currently holds the record with 13 nominations and 8 wins. But today we are talking about the winner of Best Picture for this year, Casablanca. 8 nominations, 3 wins, got nominated for Best Film Editing, Best Cinematography Black and White, Best Music Drama/Comedy, Best Writing, Best Supporting Actor, Best Director, and Outstanding Picture, winning for Writing, Directing, and Best Picture. Premiered November 26, 1942, would have a bigger release in 1943, but we rushed this thing to a premiere to take advantage of the Allied invasion of Africa. Very, very timely film, obviously, with the subject matter and the status of the war overall in the global world. Based on an unproduced play called Everyone's Coming to Rick's. It got a good reception. This is kind of the first Best Picture winner we've talked about that wasn't necessarily an immediate, massive, we've never seen this before success. It got good reception, financially did well, critically did well, but really was kind of a surprise winner to get Best Picture and get all these awards. The reputation that we maybe look at with Casablanca now, and surely we'll get into legacy, is something that kind of developed over time. It wasn't necessarily a right away thing, as with the other films we've discussed. With that preamble out of the way, let's talk about Casablanca. I'm so excited to have everyone here. I think it says something that so many people wanted to join for this episode. Surprisingly, none of you wanted to join for the Great Ziegfeld. I don't know where you guys were for that week, but that's totally okay.
Busy. I was otherwise engaged. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. For some reason, everyone seemed busy that weekend, but for Casablanca, everyone can show up. I don't know, man. Let's turn over to Nick first. I would love your opening thoughts, because I know you have a lot of passion for this film. I think a lot of people here have passion, but I know you specifically love Casablanca. Take it away with your opening thoughts on the film.
Oh, unsurprisingly, I love Casablanca. I have a long history with it that started way back in early high school, because I was watching a lot of TV. They were showing a lot of classics on the weekends. I remember having a full marathon in 8th grade, watching 4 or 5 Alfred Hitchcock films in one Sunday. It was amazing. It was the golden age for me of discovering cinema and discovering movies. And on a weekend, I finally watched Casablanca because they were playing it on TV, and it's one of those movies that you always hear about. Like you mentioned, you have you're Gone with the Winds, you have Ben-Hur, you have Lawrence of Arabia, and you also have Casablanca. It's like, oh my god, you've seen the poster, you know of Humphrey Bogart, play it again, Sam. All those like cliched quotes that, yeah, like everything about it. It's legendary. It's a true piece of Hollywood legend. And when I watched it as a 14-year-old, I was like, this is amazing. it it really really captured me to the point that I actually became slightly obsessed with Humphrey Bogart for a short time. We were doing HTML code and C++ coding in high school for tech class, and I created a web page biography of Humphrey Bogart. It was like, what are you going to make? Just make a page about Humphrey Bogart. Why not? So it's a very very dear film to me, and I've seen it, I want to say, 4 or 5 times over the years. By now, this time around, I decided to watch it with the Roger Ebert commentary track, which is absolutely delightful. If you want to hear someone who really loves a movie, listen to Roger Ebert talking about Casablanca. It's just an incredible film. I think, in terms of its entertainment value, it's just such a fun story. The romance is so engaging, it's so classical. So much of the movie doesn't necessarily make sense in a grounded in reality type of way. It makes sense in a cinematic way. It is a heightened story, heightened emotions, heightened visuals. The way that they use light and shadow in this film and how the camera work evolves throughout, it's truly truly beautiful. Humphrey Bogart, Ingrid Bergman, outstanding. Claude Rains, one of the best performances, honestly, for me in cinema. I'm very very happy to be here talking about one of my all-time favorite movies.
Jakub, what are your thoughts on Casablanca?
Well, I don't look. I can. I'm following Nick's essentially now, like, I don't know, a machine gun fire of hashtags. Uh, it's gonna be hard to follow this. I don't think I have the same level of love towards this movie, although this is a movie that kind of keeps growing on me. And this like Casablanca came into my life when I was already a grown ass man. I don't know why, but I think this is kind of one of those where I sat down to watch this. Maybe this is my own fault. That was years ago. Almost as a cinephile, just going on like, well, let's see what this best movie of all time is all about. Having, I think, maybe just even recently then come off like Citizen Kane and being like, wow, I never thought I would say that I disagree with Roger Ebert on this, but this is not the best film of all time. But Casablanca, well, is a movie that kind of keeps growing on me. And with each rewatch, I think I kind of find new sort of like layers to it. And like, just in general terms, it's very difficult to find a Humphrey Bogart film that's not good. Like, that's just in general. Like, even some of like the weirdest ones with, I don't know, directed by William Wyler or Nicholas Ray, where they're just giving him something weird to do. They're still cool to look at because he's just a magnetic presence, right? So with that in mind, what I will say is, look, everyone talks about, the quotes, the sort of the iconic moments, and maybe this is a point of conversation for later on. The idea of how the movie kind of just grew to this iconic status because it wasn't really regarded as such, right, on release. But to me now, this becomes like there is a thematic conversation underneath it that's incredibly political, and actually this should be a movie that we should really start showing, like, American young adults as a as an example of, hey, just forget about characters, think about themes, and think about what people used to stand for, and think about what people used to make movies about because they felt they mattered, right? And this is something that I'm pretty sure wasn't really necessarily picked up on at the time, because it was a genuine cash grab of like, hey, this kind of sounds like it will make money because of how it's connected to what's happening outside. But overall, I think it actually stands the test of time. Probably in like maybe one of the sort of best movies to stand the test of time in history. Like, this movie is at this point nearly 80 something years old, and it doesn't feel it. That's, for me, this is a mark of greatness when you can watch a movie that was produced in like 1942, 43, and it does not look like it, right? Does not feel it. The sort of dynamic of dialogue is essentially timeless. The blocking of scenes, cinematography, just play the shadow and light playing together is kind of sort of like you'd expect a movie in now to look like if someone decided to shoot it in black and white deliberately, right? So with that, I'll probably stop rambling, and I'll say, yeah, I'm growing. I mean, I don't think I'm going to get on the bandwagon of like this is the best movie of all time, because I think I'm just culturally disconnected from it way more than I think Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel used to be. So, but I will say that, yeah, it's a great film, and it's definitely worth watching, and it's most definitely worth watching now. So yeah, that's me.
Hillary?
I would say my journey has been similar to Jakub's. I'm not sure what year I saw this or how old I was or anything. I was definitely not in high school. Well, I'll say that much. And it is one of those films that has that reputation. I think that's what brings a lot of people to it, especially as adults, where they think, okay, this film has a reputation. I like films. I'll sit down and watch it and see if it meets my expectations. And it seems like it's still satisfying those expectations. People are impressed with this film, even though it is 80 years old, like I just said. And I remember the first time seeing this and thinking, wow, I'm really engaging with this. I like this film a lot. I don't want to say it's on the longer side, especially considering the environment we're in now, where films seem to have to be 2.5 hours long, even if they don't need to be. But it does seem to go by quite fast. So the pacing is really great, although that's usually not what I'm looking for in a film. And it is one of those films that, especially as I'm seeing it more often, and applying it to things I understand better now as an adult, and also seeing how it contrasts with the time that I'm currently living in, that all of us are living in, it has a lot more resonance. And there's things in this film, even just this time around watching it, there's certain things that are said or are done or that you see on screen where you can kind of think, yeah, that's happening right now. That's happening in my community. And it's very striking, but it does give you hope. I think this film does give you hope because you're seeing different ways that people are pushing back against certain things that are unjust or resisting in different ways. And so it kind of provides a template as a viewer. At least you can internalize that and think, how would I deal with this situation? It's not something that's far off, like, oh, this happened, in the 1940s, that time's behind us, the war's over, we won. It can happen again. And it's worth noting that this film was made during a time where the war had not been won yet, and people did not know how it was going to end or how much worse it was going to be. So I think it was a film that came about at the right time, but then it also has that, that gold dust that makes it a classic. It's one of those films that's important, and there's a reason why it's important. And I think it's also hard for people to troll a little bit. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Like, I know on ClapperCast, you go and look at popular films and like the top reviews will all be jokes. With Casablanca, it's not like that. And I don't think it's ever been like that. It's easy to parody or mimic, and the lines are very famous. But it is something that I think people can't really turn into a meme. So it's got that going for it as well. It's still being taken seriously, which is pretty incredible after decades of being around. And, we could be sick of it, but we're not. So I'm going to leave that there and turn it back over to you, Carson.
Yeah, I was very excited, but nervous for this episode, to be honest. So I first watched Casablanca about a decade ago when I was in high school, just going through like classic films, what are the best films? And I remember really enjoying it. And then a decade passed and I've not seen this film. And while I know I enjoyed it back then, I've seen a lot of movies now. There's a lot of classic films and a lot of movies in general. That are recognized and seen as being great, that maybe when we revisit them, or at least when I revisit them, don't necessarily hold up to the standards of what I look for in cinema. Looking just at this list, I didn't do a ton of preparation for this episode, but looking at the list of what else was nominated for Best Picture, I know there are some heavy hitters here. I think The Song of Bernadette's great. I think The Oxbow Incident, shout out our boy from Wings. I think that's fantastic. It's like the only Western I've ever liked, and it's one of my favorite, like, films ever. So I was like really prepared for the conversation I would have to have coming to this episode of like, Casablanca's good, maybe it's not as great, and here's how we're gonna get into it. But revisiting the film, yeah, I mean, it's fucking incredible. Like, it's Casablanca, right? And it almost is like when we talk about a film of this size and this iconic level of film, where like everyone at home, you either have seen the film or you know of this movie, you know of the lines, you know of the scenes, you know that it's incredible. It almost gets to a point where it's like, what are we going to talk about on this episode? Because I feel like Casablanca has been talked to by death. Yes, this movie, and I think it's worth probably talking about some of the layers here, because there is a pretty compelling, grounded story here of a man caught up in conflict, caught up in war, who has to make the moral decision of how does he interact with war, how does he interact with that setting. I will say immediately I wanted to write a feature comparing this, Terrence Malick's A Hidden Life, and Schindler's List, because I think all three have really different angles for how you respond to conflict, some of which I agree with, some of which I do not agree with, but I think this is a fascinating text on that front. But then the more you dig, the more you look into what this film, and we'll get into it, you know, later on with the scorecard and stuff, but what it represents for America at the time, what this represents as far as this concept of like activism and needing to use your voice for activism, and it's not right just to be like a neutral party, but instead you use your position for good. It's hard not to get caught up in those emotions. And yeah, Hillary, I mean, like, we're recording this the same weekend we had nationwide protests, like obviously politics, and we kind of mention it every week at this point it seems, but like politics right now is a very charged thing. It feels very defeating at times to be reading the news cycle or to be made aware of just what is happening on a global level. But this film, it really does like jazz you both to understand the tragedy of like fascism and the tragedy of the situation, but also this feeling of like you can do the right thing, is very inspiring. So like Casablanca for me, you know, is it the best film ever made? No. Is it the best film of the year? You know, you can, I think, have a debate against a couple films, but certainly this is a masterpiece, and I'm very excited to have the house here today to discuss the film. I think it's probably best if we start. Let's leave kind of like the bigger politics out for a second, and let's really talk about the drama and the story of this man, his position in this bar or whatever in Casablanca, as well as his romance. There is a pretty iconic. It is funny. I think everyone views Casablanca, and I get why, as like being a film mainly about romance when there's so much here not at all about romance. But the actual core drama of this guy, I don't know who wants to start out, but I would think it'd be worthwhile to discuss kind of the setting and some of that grounded drama. Jakub, do you want to give it a go?
I tried to give everyone like two breaths worth of worth of space to kind of just say it. You know?
To be fair, I've also not, I don't think, I mean, I don't know about you guys, I've not recorded in this space with like four people for a while, so it's definitely feeling like a little bit like getting back into, oh, I remember when we did this every week in 2020, I guess like this is how it goes. But Jakub, take it away.
Sure. Yeah, because like at this point, like I don't want to just jump into things because I have a just unhealthy tendency to hog the mic, and then just you'll end up with like a 20-minute just ramble on my behalf, you know, and then what are you supposed to do with it? But as a romance, this is actually quite a weird one, because again, like in the context of like the 1940s, this is a movie that doesn't really just divulge anything in terms of exposition until I want to say like halfway through the film. You get some kind of like a flashback, right, of actually what happened in Paris, right? Where you have like, you know, Rick and Ilsa. Like the whole idea of the romance is almost kept as a bit of a mystery, and because you're dropped into this world, and again, like this is kind of how you see the mastery behind the camera, because there's a lot of trust placed in the audience, because you're not told anything about who this guy is, who this woman is, who her partner potentially is. Like they all talk about, oh, Laszlo this, Laszlo that, you know, like there's this guy, there's whatever, oh, Rick is this guy, Rick is whatever, you know, like there's some, oh, Courier this, Courier that. It's almost like a masterclass of foreshadowing, because they foreshadow quite a lot in here in a very subtle way. And they introduced this, I kind of want to say, like a hard left turn with this woman turning up into in a bar and requesting a song, and then you realize that when Sam goes like, "Oh no, this is a song," and you're like, "Okay, what's going on?" And this is kind of, I think, where the movie hooks you, because they treat love story as a mystery almost. Like it almost feels like like a Hitchcock film for I want to say like a brief 10 minutes where you're trying to figure out what the hell happened, what's going on, who these people are, do they have like a shared history, what's going on, and then you slowly start to realize that their history is not necessarily a mystery, but more um, like an unresolved issue that they don't want to address. That there's a lot of dirt behind some people's fingernails. There's a lot of grief and a lot of sort of regret and sort of broken promises. And by that point, you're all at the same time you're positioned in this weird sort of place, like you're wedged between a rock and a hard place because you're like I don't know like how like do you take sides in this sort of conflict? Like do you side with Rick, who feels betrayed, and he's like I suppose like his heartache is also like connected to like this his wounded idealism as well, because he used to be a guy who stood for something and now he's checked out. How do you treat this woman, like because she lied to him or she left him cold or whatever? And like maybe this is my personal sort of stance on this, but not many films from 86 years ago or 84 years ago can actually do this for me. And this whole love story, as it's told almost exclusively in visuals. This is I don't want to say unheard of at the time, but very rare, where filmmakers would trust the actual visual medium of cinema to tell the story, as opposed to getting the character to just stand up and say, well, don't you remember what happened in Paris in 1937 when we all visited and whatever? Just no, like no one stands up and just delivers a speech just to get everyone on the same page. No, they just trust that you'll connect these sort of the images. There's a montage of what happened in Paris and whatever, but there's a lot of this love story is played on people's faces, on Bogey's face and on Ingrid Bergman's face. And this is something that I just, on this rewatch particularly, I paid attention to this and was just, wow, I didn't actually recognize that this is quite ingenious for the time specifically, to trust the romance to be delivered in such a subtle way, because you could almost expect that a filmmaker or a producer would say like, no, we have to get people to cry, like we have to tell people that they need to what they need to feel, and just no. I don't know if this is the producers at Warner's. Is this Jack Warner being a genius, or is this Michael Curtiz just editing in camera and saying, hey, it will sing, trust me, bro. I don't think he said bro, but how this love story kind of is developed, and how this sort of this central romance, it's almost not a surprise that this is the thing that people really remember, because it really leaves a mark.
Yeah, if I can jump in, like this is definitely something that stuck with me for so many years before revisiting it a few years ago for the first time in a while. Was always a love story. And I think there is something, part of me is kind of torn because, in a way, I agree with what you're saying, Jakub, with for the time it's almost unheard of. Of course, you have some movies that are more visual, and you mentioned Citizen Kane, of course, is one movie that does a lot with visuals and editing. But then you both feel the evolution of cinema, the way the language is expanding the medium, trusting the audience, that the audience will understand, and will stay engaged and be willing to, wait patiently for information to be dispensed. But I also think this is something that we should be looking at back now. Like every young filmmaker should be looking back at this film and be like, "Come, you cannot take the scene where Ilse is introduced and the stairs and the energy, the lighting, the diffusion on the lens to give her that look, the way she looks down. There's so much in here that's so instantly engaging." And I do think it kind of fits with the whole war angle of the film, because it gives it this classical vibe. I want to say every great story in history always has a romantic angle of sorts. We can go back to, the Iliad and the War of Troy, the Odyssey. All those things are like big and grand scope, but there's always love at the center. There's always romance of some sorts. And in here, it's just like that. And it's just so perfectly cast. It's something that Humphrey Bogart, you put him in a film and you just tell him to mope around and smoke, and you just get the character. You just get him. He's so bitter. He's so done with everything, done with all this nonsense. He's not taking any sides. He's just, doing his own thing, shady dealings in this bar. And you get Ingrid Bergman, and the way she's always looking down and looking away, and this slight tremble of her lips. It's honestly, just thinking about it, it's so great. I think I mentioned like a review or something that I would love just a photo book of stills from this film, especially the close-ups. And it still makes me emotional. The last time I watched it properly without a commentary track, it actually made me cry by the end, because it just works. You are watching a story that should not technically on paper work, because you see, like, the main hero of the narrative technically is Victor Laszlo. He's the one who's gonna save and help fight the Nazis in Europe, and we need to bring him out of Casablanca and all of that. Like, he should be the main hero. He's the one who's married to Ilsa, but you don't care about him. You care about Rick, and you care about her, and you almost want to see them get together. And the fact that they do not get together by the end is the point. And it's chemistry. It's something that Roger Ebert mentioned in the commentary, and it's something that I was thinking about recently watching some movies, where it's like, damn, you can have the best script of the world. The characters can be written in such a rich, detailed way, but if you do not believe their chemistry, if you do not believe these people actually love each other, it would not work. And the first moment, like you mentioned, Jakub, the first moment you see them interact, you understand all of the history. Maybe you don't know the details. Maybe you don't even need the details, but you just get it. You get something went very wrong. You get that they loved each other. You get that there was something there that's still present deep down of all the remorse. It's it's true cinema. I think that's something about, we're talking about Best Picture here. And I think every year, what's the best picture? We can have always conversations about personal preference or objective value, if we want to look at objective value, which is nonsense in some ways. But for me, it has to be something that is inherently cinematic. And this is based on a play that probably really could not work if you put it together as well as the movie does.
Like, how does it work as a play? It's beyond me. They must
Just
have
like the
been,
bar setting, probably.
Yeah.
It's a hangout play. I don't know. It'd be a hangout play instead of a hangout movie.
It's like everyone goes. Was it titled "Everyone Goes to Rick's" or something like this? Or
Yeah, pretty much. Something like that.
What it would have looked like Blue Moon.
Kind of.
Yes,
Yeah,
literally.
I could see that. Yeah, a
It would be
stage play
like
where
Blue
it's just
Moon.
like bar.
Which heavily
weirdly
references
enough, it's a love
Casablanca.
letter to Casablanca anyway.
Well, I was going to weigh in here and say that the scene that Nicolò was just talking about, where they first see each other, and this is something that happens if you watch a film multiple times, you start noticing other performances, but Dooley Wilson as Sam. I mean, if you think about that character, he's referenced in this line that people parody all the time, but it's so amazing. The second she walks in and he recognizes her, you already know that Hitchcockian thing that Jakub was talking about. It's already set in motion. And it's an amazing performance, kind of being this proxy between the two of them. He obviously, was friends with both of them when they were a couple, and he's kind of caught in the middle, and his performance captures what's going on between these two characters before they even see each other. And as far as the love story goes, I mean, what I'll contribute to the conversation is there's something personally for me, and it's interesting because Nicolò and I just talked about this on the Wuthering Heights episode. Totally different conversation, different love story, but there's something about love stories that are unrequited or doomed or just don't work. And I think they tend to stick with you longer because there's that tragedy behind them of two people who don't end up together. And I think what's intriguing to me about this love story is that it is somewhat of a morality play. It's about people trying to do the right thing. And in order for that to happen, there are sacrifices that need to be made. And sometimes wrong things need to be done in order for the right thing to happen. And I mean, we talked about Laszlo. He's not supposed to be the most compelling character emotionally for us, but the work he's doing is quite important to the war and the particular political situation that's going on there. So it does give stakes to the story as far as like she needs to be with him and she made a commitment to him and he's a good man. They're all trying to do the right thing. And I think that's what makes it so tragic. So for me personally, I don't really have time for stories where people are stabbing each other in the back because they want to get the racks off or something like that. That just doesn't intrigue me at all. But with Casablanca, there's desire, there's longing, there's all of these very powerful emotions that all of them are feeling, even Laszlo, as tempered as he is, that makes it tragic because they are all trying to, respect each other or trying to come out of this unscathed. And the ending couldn't be more perfect because it is still a tragedy and we don't know what's going to happen afterwards, but it's what needed to happen. So it's satisfying and it's tragic at the same time. So I'll end there. And of course I'm going to turn it back over to you, Carson. We're going in a round table and I want to hear what you have to think about the love story.
Yeah, we're just going in a circle here. No, I mean it's incredibly effective, and it's interesting as a love story because, as you mentioned, Hillary, like at the end, while yes, the emotions you're seeing like hurts and it's a tragedy at the end, there's really no other way, as you say, like this could have concluded. There's no other way that this character could have felt as fulfilled and like his almost like, I mean, he's obviously a complex character, but ultimately he has like a pretty moral purity to him. He could not have gotten on that plane with her, considering the situation. So it is one of those endings where like it is sad, but you really are not sitting there. At least I'm not sitting there like, oh my gosh, just go hop on the plane, you idiot! Like go be with her. It ends perfectly. What I do want to circle back to is we've mentioned the performances here, and the performances here are incredible. Like Bogart has never been this good, in my opinion. Granted, I know he has a wide body of work to see. I know Jack just did a whole Bogart marathon, so I don't know if he would disagree with us. I think he's phenomenal here. Bergman is great, but this is such a good example. And we talked already in this episode about what you should probably show this film in film class for. I think you probably could create a whole semester and like every class look at this because there's so much here. But when you have a great performance mixed with great filmmaking, it is like truly magical. And we've talked on this podcast before, we just did with Godard, Nick, when we talk about the camera loving an actor on screen and projecting them in a way where you can feel that passion for them. Here, every single choice with this camera and with lighting, it works to just take these incredible performances and uplift them to even the next level. I mean, Bergman literally, when you can see her eyes, they put lights to where she literally has like sparkles in her eyes to where you can sit there and it's a natural, but it's so effective. Bogart's face is almost completely cut in half with a shadow and is going to like noir filmmaking to show how conflicted he is. Like these are choices that, yes, I mean, they're well documented and everything, but you are sitting there and it's almost unbelievable the heightened sense. And I think, Nick, you've mentioned this before also on this episode so far, like the heightened sense of cinema here is really, really infectious, but it always works. Like it's not a film that feels like it's biting off more than it could chew, or it's jumping the shark by having these heightened senses of reality. I don't know how this would have worked as a play, just simply because, not even because I think the limited setting and everything, but so much of the emotion shines because of the specific choices with filmmaking that you just can't get on stage. Granted, not to offend any communities here, I don't want to be the next Timothy Chalamet. There's a lot of great stuff you can do on the play. This is not to say cinema does more, but cinema does some things. No, not niche. Everyone goes to the opera. What are you talking about? But
I've been twice this week.
three here, so don't even start. But I definitely have to say, like, I think the cinema aspect of this you really can't overlook, where it's just like a beautiful pairing of the talent on screen and the talent behind the camera, really creating like infectious magic. I also love how it shoots. Like the production design here, I forgot how much I love the production design here. I'm so sad the Academy Museum used to have like the actual props and sets, and like remade his bar, and you could go and it was really cool. But the production elements are fantastic here. For being, you can definitely tell when this is based on a play how much of this is just set in this bar. But I think it feels very effective. It feels lived in when there's all these characters there, whether they're all playing games or whatever they're doing at the bar. I think it feels very infectious of a space to live in. And then the great contrast when, the police show up, kick everyone out, and you just get this like looming emptiness of the site. I think it's very effective. So I also will throw that out there as a positive.
You just mentioned, by the way, like how heightened everything is. I think both. By the way, it's kind of both heightened and grounded, and I don't know how to articulate it correctly. And then but maybe this is kind of also just dovetailing into your comment about Carson about how you don't know how this would play out on the stage, and I think the answer would be you can't. I mean, what would transpire on stage would just be completely different. This is something that I think. I mean, I remember we had conversations on Gems, on like Mike Nichols and John Cassavetes and stuff like that, but specifically on Mike Nichols, who actually would sometimes choose between what he wants to do on the stage and what he wants to do as a film, and then specifically would make comments sometimes like, this needs to be a movie, like something like I think Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf or Carnal Knowledge. These will be things that you just on the stage you would not get the same effect because the camera allows you to get so close to the face that you cannot, like there's a separation between the stage and the audience that you just cannot really overcome. Meanwhile, the camera can just right up to the person's nose, and the lighting person can just get the light bulb positioned right in such a great way that like the Humphrey Bogart, even without really moving a muscle, looks as though he just got pepper sprayed. He he, like, you can see how heartbreak essentially just takes place in real time on someone's face, right? And this is something that you just cannot. Again, peace and love to all the theater geeks. You cannot get this across in a stage performance. You have to resort to different means to get similar effects across to the audience. And it's not like it's impossible to get the audience to feel the heartache and hear the heartbreak in real time. You can, but this is kind of sort of like how you, like, if you're already making a movie out of this is how you make the best use of your tools. Like the cinematic language at work in here is essentially executed perfectly, right? And actually, just like when we were saying, like, you could turn this into like a semester in film school or in like university. And like I was just like, when you were just guys talking about how on Letterboxd people make joke reviews, I looked through, just, what the vast majority of like half-star rating for reviews for this movie is? Oh, this is black and white, I watched it in film class, this was dog shit. So like, if you force people to watch this film, this is how you get anti-fans, So you'll grow a whole generation of people who hate this film, and there's going to be a massive sort of turn of the tide, which is like an anti-Casablanca generation. It's going to just crop up out of nowhere, and you'll be like, where did they come from? Film school. That's where.
So, they also won't understand this film because remember, Netflix now is saying that you have to repeat the plot openly every like 20 minutes to get them to follow along. So unless we add some extra scenes where like we AI Hungry Bogart to explain the plot every 20 minutes, it's not gonna connect now.
There's gonna be a constant voiceover or something.
Don't give them ideas.
No, I won't. Well, they're not going to listen to me. I know that much. We were talking about how this started out as a play. I mean, I think Nicolò knows more about the production than we do, because this is a favorite of yours. But it was something that was rewritten a lot. And it's one of those things where people discuss, how did this work with so many writers and like this patchwork of different ideas and people with different styles, or how did it all fit together? Because it seems really seamless. I think as a theater piece, what I'm thinking about is that it probably would be less of a focus on the love story and more of a galvanizing thing. Like, you do feel like you are in the space with all these people who are resisting outside forces, especially the scene where they all start singing to drown out the Germans. I mean, that could almost
it's my favorite scene.
Yeah, like this audience participation thing, like people in the audience probably would start singing along. So it's just a different medium. But there's that magic to it that I think is quite intriguing. What Carson was talking about, Ingrid Bergman's eyes, it reminds me of a film from earlier, G.W. Pop's Pandora's Box. There's this shot of Louise Brooks right near the end where they make it look like there's a galaxy in her eyes while she's trying to take this man upstairs with her for a tryst. And it's just magical what films can do to people's faces. I think particularly women's faces. they can make them just look like these supernatural, gorgeous creatures. And what I can weigh in a little bit with Humphrey Bogart, and then I kind of want to turn it over to Niccolo because we're kind of sidelining him, is that it is a performance that works for me. I've been watching a lot of Bogart films, and this is so strange. No matter what time period you live in, there's certain actors that I don't respond to who are alive right now, and there's ones that do bring me into theaters. And then when you watch older films, you realize, oh my god, the same thing is happening. And Bogart actually doesn't do a lot for me. I can't engage with him the same way a lot of other people do. It's not because I don't think he's talented, to be clear, but there is something about his performance in this, and I think it is because of the morality he's struggling with, that makes him more compelling, and it's just a perfect film. Same with Bergman. I can't say there's any other Bergman films that I think, oh yeah, I watched this Ingrid Bergman film because she's so good in it. But there's something about her hunger, her desire, her what she's feeling with so little compared to what we're allowed to show now. It's pretty carnal. So um, anyway, that's me weighing in, and I want to hear what Niccolo has to say.
Yeah, I think like my appeal for Humphrey Bogart, I don't want to sound banal, but he's always been cool.
Yes, I know
Laurent
he's a cool
Bonnell.
guy.
but cool in the classical sense, in the proper American sense of like he's so calm, possessed, stoic, always the smartest man in the room. There's definitely a lot of vulnerability here that you don't see in other
Yeah.
roles. I would probably say top three performances: this, Treasure of the Sierra Madre, and In a Lonely Place.
Oh, good. I was hoping you'd say that one. That's
All three of
vulnerable too,
them
but
are
weird, but in a weird way. Yeah.
all three the most vulnerable. Some of the most vulnerable, of course, is at others, but like otherwise, he's always, he's very quick, he's very witty, whether he's playing Philip Marlowe or whoever, a detective on a noir case, But in here, drunkard Humphrey Bogart works so well. Um, and I also want to say, like, there's so many great actors in this film. We mentioned some of them. I also want to say, like, Peter Lorre, who shows up in the opening. Can we even consider it a cameo? Maybe, kind of, for the time, a retroactive cameo. But also, I have to say, a lot of my maybe draw to this film when I first watched it also goes back to Looney Tunes, which maybe
Oh,
sounds very
I was just
bizarre.
about to say.
There's
Bugs Bunny ruined Humphrey Bogart for generations.
Humphrey Bogart,
Probably.
Peter
Yeah.
Lorre, like those faces. Animaniacs is another
Mhm.
one.
Mm-hmm.
Like those cartoons from my childhood when I was watching them when I was like 6 or 7. I see them on repeat over and over and over and over again. And you see those references to things you don't know. And I think that's something truly magical about the zeitgeist pre-internet of like the TV era, let's say, of the 20th century, where you would be watching references in a children's show to movies of the 40s, 50s, of opera, of classical literature, and you would kind of get it. If you didn't, you would have a parent or someone older than you just be like, oh, this is that thing. This is Ride of the Valkyrie. They're like, okay, I've stored this information, and in some way, it's gonna pay off later in my life. And something like Casablanca and the face of Humphrey Bogart is just, mm, it's just truly timeless, truly, truly timeless. And even Bergman, I agree with what you said, Hilary. Like if I would say like one of her best performances, I do love Autumn Sonata as well.
Oh, it's
That
great. Oh,
Ingmar
fantastic.
Bergman made, but that's like late era, borderline end
Yeah.
of her
That's her,
era
that's her last film.
movie. Yeah, if it's not the last, it's like second to last or something. You're right.
I
It's
think
like one of the
I think
last
it's
things she ever
I think
made,
it's definitely last. And Liv
which is
Ullman's was just it's like if you haven't seen Autumn Sonata, just watch what Autumn Sonata. It's one of the
yes,
best Bergmans.
yes, yes,
Uh,
yes, yes. Um, and shout out, like I mentioned him before, um, Claude Rains, who plays
Mm-hmm.
Captain Louis Renault.
mhm.
Claude Rains, we talked about him very positively when we talked about The Invisible Man a few years ago on my podcast. But in here as well, he just owns every minute he's on screen. He's he's someone who in the wrong hands could have been either the most boring character or the most over the top character, but there's such wit and such, honestly, even their great chemistry with Bogart. You can feel that they have this kind of sort of friendship already established, this history between them. Um, but there's like one of my favorite passages. I don't remember the exact quote, but it's the moment when Rick is just pointing the gun at him and just tells him to sit down. And the way he reacts so calmly to the whole situation is like, well, I guess in this case I'll just sit down. It's amazing, and it is one of those movies that you could, like with so many movies, you could be like, hey, there's this great scene, and then there's this other great scene, and that's that. Casablanca is almost non-stop, great scene after great scene. Even the montage in Paris, which we briefly talked
Mhm.
about, it's so dreamy, it's so dreamlike. It feels like you are reliving a memory. It's this crossfade on the rear projection where they're just driving this from the Champs-Élysées to the countryside of the Ile-de-France, them talking in the room, the rain coming down, the Nazi parade, the running, the hugging, jumping on the train. Sammy's also there. It's just so dynamic. The whole film is so dynamic without going that extra step. You were talking about it, Jakub, of like, the
Mhm.
groundedness. It never goes that extra step where it becomes heavily stylized, like Citizen Kane, for instance. It
Mhm.
never puts form over content. Or
And
like content, like I mean the storytelling itself, like
like
the
the
narrative, the
filmmaker
story.
knows its place.
Mhm.
Yes.
He doesn't really get in front, like between you and the material.
Yeah, and they do make some cute things with the, like we were talking about the production design. There's rear projection, there's miniatures, there's
Shadows and whatnot, right?
little people when they're shooting the airplane in the background because they didn't actually have a big airplane, so they just were using all the tricks in the books of the time to make it work without drawing attention to itself. With something like Citizen Kane, which I also love and I think it's a great film, does draw more attention to its form, to its style, more so than this one does.
By the way, on the subject of the police sort of captain, right now, there is a reason why this movie ends with these two walking towards the sunset, right? Because like this is something that dawned on me on this rewatch, that essentially Rick and this guy whose name now escapes me.
Captain
Christ, what is his
Renault.
name?
His name
Yes,
is Renault. Yeah.
no, there you go. He's essentially like Rick's yin to him yang. Like he's like a darker version of Rick. He's a guy who's now he's probably a wounded idealist as well. He's someone who used to care, but now he goes like, he says this to this Nazi general who's like, well, what, like, this is French ground, but like my loyalties can be bought with money. Like I can, like, whichever way the wind blows, this is which way I will stand. Like, so that path of least resistance and whatever, right? And this is exactly what Rick espouses, right? He doesn't stick out his neck out for nobody, right? That's what he says, like, twice, right? He doesn't stick his neck out for nobody, right? And then, like, how I realize is essentially the story is essentially just, well, taking place between three people: him, Renault, and Ingrid Bergman's Ilsa. Because everybody else doesn't change. Like, Paul Henry doesn't change. All the other players are sort of objects. Meanwhile, these guys, so Ilsa gets closure. Rick gets closure and actually just takes a stand, takes a moral stand to sacrifice some, I don't know, like, close a book on whatever, on the love for Ilsa, and just do something for the greater good of mankind. Something that he used to believe in, because it's told somewhere in between, sort of in between the lines, that he used to, like, run guns to in Ethiopia, which is where I think there used to be a conflict, or he fought, or he supported the loyalists during the Spanish Civil War, which was the leftist sort of government in Spain during the Francoist uprising, right? So he used to play for the good guys, like he was like Hemingway would go to sort of essentially just go to Spain and fight the fascists, like he was one of those guys, he was one of those Americans who would actually pick up and go, right? And then something changed him, like, and then as a result of this, he's kind of the guy who starts thinking differently. right? Meanwhile, Renault actually does the same thing. He also takes a stand. He doesn't really arrest him over shooting a Nazi general. He goes like, round up the usual suspects. Another iconic line that people really
Yep.
just miss from where the usual suspects phrase comes from. This, but you can see how this sort of the story is. It's not necessarily just a love. The love story is kind of like a catalyst for people to change, and this is a story of change, and this change is like I say change a lot, but this this change is kind of just playing out in almost purely visual terms. Very little is said, and whatever is said is kind of left in a very subtle way that's almost important. Like it's very difficult to kind of just take note if you're not paying attention, right? Because you're paying attention to other things. Because I don't know, maybe you're coming into this film as this is the classic love story, so I'm paying attention to this, and then all these little bits of trivia will just kind of sort of evaporate. But I think this is kind of how you see this genius, right? That there's complexity to the character work. Like essentially, like if you disregard the cinema or the cinematic language of this, like there is a thesis to be written about the character work in here, right? And actually, to what Nicolò and Hillary were saying, like, and imagine that this is a story that went through, like, I want to say probably half a dozen writers, right? Who probably at some point all contributed, right? Something like some of these lines come from the guy who's credited. Some of these lines come from people who didn't get the credit, and you won't ever know, But it's almost like an example of how some stories have to be told in this way because the universe deterministically wanted the story to exist like this, and just stars lined up for this, and that's what we get. Casablanca exists because it must. So
I will say to the film's credit, yes, there went through all these rewrites and such. Feels incredibly focused. Like, it does not feel like you have 10 people fighting for attention with the script, like so many other films that we can all think of that have had rewrites, very notably, that feel kind of disorienting, like a mess. Casablanca never feels that way. I will say that, Jakub, this conversation of change and such, this is where the film really elevates itself for me. We've been talking a lot about kind of the groundedness here, but this is very much so playing into like U.S. politics at the time, while the US projects an image of like, we did the war, we saved everyone, woo woo. Like, even though it's a mess like we kind of largely created with certain treaties and such, we really hesitated to get involved in World War II. We were very much so like just kind of sitting there watching it happen for a long time. So this change of Rick, deciding to break his cynical kind of view in life and like, okay, no, I'm going to do the right thing here. I imagine very, very inspiring for America at the time, for Americans, kind of also redefining this like rekindling idea of like, what is the role of America, right? And whether for better or for worse, you certainly can, even just from recent events, kind of debate America's role in global events. But this idea that we're going to do the right thing, we're going to step up when someone's in need, even if it's across the ocean, we're going to come in and save them and help the world. It is very much so like the rekindling of that idea, to where I think this, and again, we'll get to it in a little bit, I think really captures this era and this pivotal moment in like the development of the American ideology of themselves and self-realization incredibly well. The one thing I will say I did not love, the one complaint I have about this film, is Renault's change. I do feels like a little bit written. It feels a little bit at the end like, oh, I feel like if that was your
convenient.
Like deeper morality, yeah, but also like I feel like it could have cleaned, like a lot of this could have been made a little bit simpler had you just like maybe come to this ultimate moral realization a little bit earlier. That's the one area in this where I'm like, I don't know if that fully hits. It's nice, but like it's a little bit lesser than the rest of this film. But I do think that works in like overall.
I mean, that thing, maybe this is the reason for that, could potentially be because this change, like Rick is given like a whole movie to change, right? Meanwhile, this guy has, I want to say, under 2 minutes, right? Because this plays out almost while the Nazi general's driving to the airport, right? Because he betrays him, and then he goes like, well, actually, this is, like he has these second thoughts that are kind of sort of not necessarily telegraphed, but kind of overlooked. And this is kind of almost where if you haven't paid attention as a viewer to these extra little nuggets of like, oh, my loyalties are where, like where money is or whatever. Where you see that, we're planting these seeds, we're foreshadowing this already. It's just we're not paying attention to it because Rick is the thing we're focusing on because we're fleshing out his arc. Well, understandably, then it kind of will look convenient and kind of sort of like, well, did they really just rush it because they felt like they need to wrap it under 105 minutes or or what? But to your point on this of the politics, by the way, just has to be said, like absolutely spot on conversation where like America was, like tiptoeing, like Churchill was begging on his knees, hey guys, like we're here alone, like the Nazis are essentially just this close. Like if it hadn't been for the fact that really Hitler made stupid mistakes himself, and the fact that, I suppose, well, Britain had a radar which prevented the Nazis from launching an amphibian assault on Britain, then it would have been a different conversation. And like Roosevelt was like, I don't know, because we have a lot of Germans, and we have to. And he was thinking like in terms of how am I gonna win the election, if we alienate the Midwest or wherever. Because this is where all these people live, and like we have to kind of, I don't know, but let's just send some ships. Tom Hanks, what's the film? Greyhound. Is it Greyhound?
Hey, and sequel coming soon. Keep an eye out.
The Migration.
Oh, it's like real. It's like next year coming out, by the way. But
but you see, like the America had to be like really slapped in the face by the Japanese to go like, okay, fine, we're in.
Exactly.
But even like in the history of Hollywood, you kind of see this, like before Pearl Harbor, there was no such thing as a pro-war film in Hollywood. They were all like avoiding this.
Not really. I mean, maybe not Hollywood, but there was definitely stuff stirring around in the waters. There were people who were concerned about what's happening. But
from what I've read, I think only after Pearl Harbor, essentially like Louis B. Mayer and Jack Warner, they essentially said like, fine, pro-war stuff is in. Can we get all these people to start making propaganda shit? Like Frank Capra signed on to like the Signal Corps and whatever.
Yeah.
That was after Pearl Harbor, right? And this kind of coincides with this actually becoming part of the propaganda sort of. That's why this movie kind of wasn't really like considered as like this big deal at the time, because it was like, it's part of the sort of the stream of pro-war films that kind of just got greenlit after Pearl Harbor, right? But I think, but you're right that like these sentiments have always been there, but they were always hamstrung by essentially leadership, right? But be it on a studio level or even governmental level, because the administration would say like to all these sort of studio heads, saying like, well, we don't want to make everything make it look like we're pro-war, so stop it in its tracks, or like the right-wing press is going to sit on you on this, like the sort of the what's his face, Randall something Hearst. These people were like we're very
William Randolph Hearst, yes.
Yeah, that's the one.
Who's the specter behind Citizen Kane?
That's exactly right.
But
they held sway.
It's true. I mean, there's other things that were around. I mean, I guess like the year before was Mrs. Miniver. I think that was a British film, or was there was British sentiment behind it more because it's a British story. But I mean, that's war propaganda. The other one that I'd bring up is
Pearl Harbor, right? Yeah,
it is after Pearl Harbor, but and then like the 49th Parallel was particularly aimed at Americans to galvanize them because they weren't involved yet. It did get released like a few months, I think, before Pearl Harbor was hit. So there was stuff in the waters. I don't think it was sanctioned by studios. I think you're correct
but
about
49th
that.
Parallel, that's the Archers. These guys were British.
Yes, exactly. But it was aimed at Americans to shame them, or at least like get them, somewhat like emotionally motivated because the Nazis are going through Canada, who's in the war, to get to the neutral United States, which retrospectively to us seems insane. But that's what it was, constructed to do, was to make us feel like this is like, maybe we should do something about this. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I think that there are parallels to now. I think we are getting more into the political situation. Just last night, I encountered some people I never met before, and they were talking about their son who's in his early 20s and that he doesn't feel motivated to do anything politically. He just wants to stay out of everything. He doesn't want to vote. And there are parallels to these characters that we're talking about, like Rick or Renault, where there is a wounded idealism. And it makes me think of this thing that George Carlin said, not to say I'm like a super fan of George Carlin, but this thing he said was quite true, is that at the heart of any cynic, there's a wounded or disappointed idealist. That,
Pretty much.
these
Yep.
these people are burned. There's like a learned helplessness that's going on, and maybe even their cynicism in the film is kind of a cover or a smokescreen. I don't
Or a
stick my neck out for
performance, right?
anybody. Yeah, like I don't stick my neck out for anybody, or I only do things according to money. It is part of their performance in front of other people. It's worth noting that at the end, they're at the airport now and there aren't as many people around. So maybe I can buy Renault making that turn where he's like, where there's just not as many people watching, where he's like, this is actually who I am, or I'm going to do it this time because no one was around to see this, and what I say goes, and I'm going to lie,
Yep.
So
At the same, like politically speaking, by the way, to the sort of like behind every cynic, there's a wounded idealist, and that's how this movie also like speaks to, should speak to young people now.
Exactly.
Would be add another quote: "For evil to prevail, good men need to do nothing."
Or look the other way. Yeah. That's been happening a lot. And that's what's making me personally go crazy. It's just like, why is everyone looking the other way? This is pretty obvious. So
so it's and actually, if you phrase it like this, as in like, hey, sit down with a bunch of people to watch Casablanca and think about, look at Rick and imagine him being a stand-in for America. Just he represents the American sentiment. I don't want to get involved. I don't want to have anything to do with this. Your politics is none of my business. I just run a bar in here. I just want to make money. I just want to be left alone and do my shit, right? And realize that, say, that the actual sort of catharsis at the end comes not from him just, I don't know, getting the girl or getting closure, but actually doing stuff, just getting off his ass and doing the right thing for the right reasons, and then realize that, yeah, that's what America used to stand for, and actually, and maybe at some point had to be dragged into this this mindset, kicking and screaming, right? For the better of everyone around them, because actually, like, when you're a big boy on campus, you have a responsibility. When you have, like, maybe this is my old school sort of upbringing, like if you're one of the bigger kids, like outside playing with others, when you're one of the bigger kids, more capable or stronger, you kind of have like an innate feeling of responsibility that, like, so if there's smaller people around you or like weaker or whatever, to defend them if need be, and that's kind of what he represents. Like, well, I have the means, I have the money, I can make it happen. It's just I choose not to, and the idea should be you should choose to, right? And then showing this to young people now and saying like, well, and look at how far we've gone, that we have like a country that's looking like Rick, who's about to just sell Ilsa and Laszlo all the way to the Nazis, because we've kind of just, I don't know, painted ourselves into a corner that, like, we have administrations in Western sort of countries where they will choose the wrong thing for the wrong reasons, And meanwhile, like, you show this to people and they will say, half star, black and white films are not for me.
To be fair, I don't think a lot of people are saying that. I think we're looking at a select few there.
There's at least one on Letterboxd to say that.
Well, I'm sure.
There will always be people like that. And it, honestly, like, you sit there in film school, that's like, drop out. Like, I'm sure that's semester one, like, this is not for you, leave.
There's just that big report from film schools that were like, kids can't even watch movies anymore. Like, that's the worst part of film schools. They can't even get through the screenings of the classic films, which is very funny. I do want to...
They probably will say the same thing about The Matrix. You show them The Matrix and it'll be like, I don't like these films from the 1900s.
Yep. It might get to that.
Like, who knows? Immediately just get a new gray hair will show up somewhere on your head. Unannounced anyway. Barged in.
Yeah, I think Jack would commit some act of violence at that one, to be honest. I will say I think that the character of Rick maybe has at times a bit more, and we've mentioned there's a lot of complexity to him, but I think also when you're facing a threat and you're in a position like he is, there's a worthy conversation here about like the need to survive. And we've kind of mentioned this, but like you have to, if you want to exist in this space and not just immediately become imprisoned or immediately become disenfranchised, like if you actually want to do good, you do have to like have a certain image, and you have to be very smart in how you portray yourself. And there are some things here, like when he helps the couple like gamble and get money to escape, or like it's not that he has complete inaction or he's against action per se, but it's more like he has to be really smart about how he operates, and he has to have an image where like he understands he cannot help everyone, he cannot be on the outside this radical force. I think that is a worthy conversation now. I think there's a lot of conversations about protest and how do you combat a fascist or an opposing force that has poor ideology. And it's something where now I think a lot of people on social media, for example, especially like really quick to like just go full force and be as loud as humanly possible about something, which has a place, absolutely. I just thought this was a conversation I really appreciated in here. Not that this is at all a podcast about this, and I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but that's why like I think Terrence Malick's A Hidden Life is like deeply problematic, actually, because I think it really shows like really horrible activism on screen, and it doesn't really digest like what that is practically doing. There was a quote earlier someone shared that was like, evil wins when good people do nothing.
Yep.
And that film is just very much so like, let's just do nothing and get condemned to death and die. So we have no ability to fight against fascism in that sense. I think this film has a really worthy conversation there, and it's something that, you know, and we've also talked about cancel culture and just like generally how society at this point is very much so like we want to be full force, no nuance. If you stand for something, you have to stand for it 100% of the time. There's no time for anything with working in the middle or anything. I really appreciate on a rewatch that aspect here. It is kind of wild how the more we talk about this, like every single aspect of this film really feels like it needs to be like understood to this day. I feel like with a lot of these classic films, like there's a lot that are important, but there's few that I look at like this that it's like, no, actually I think this has so many lessons that are so deeply relevant to this exact moment we're in. Let's get this thing in front of people. Like let's get more new younger people watching this movie. I think there's a lot to learn from this.
Actually,
Yeah,
by the way, to your point, when you were saying about like A Hidden Life or Schindler's List, like if you want to kind of like do a comparative study, that's the only film where the character you'd be discussing is fictitious, right? Because all these other people actually existed. So this sort of like, I don't know, misguided activism, sort of like the sort of stubborn, I'm going to let everybody suffer, but as a result of my decisions, sort of activism. Is actually rooted in reality. Like this actually this person existed, right? And like there's something to be said about, say, like, well, you know, like if you're about to commit something to a cause, you might as well make it count so you don't waste your life, right? So make it smart. And at the same time, like just ringing back to like Rick's sort of journey, like when he makes this decision to help the is it the Bulgarian couple, right, to just get money and just by cheating at I don't know, at the roulette sort of table, like he's already on that journey. Like I don't think he makes that decision if Ilsa hasn't come through the door, you know. So it's not like he makes strategic choices that wouldn't affect his business. It's just, I think he's already on that journey. It's just something that's either still internalized or not explicitly stated. So, which is again part of the genius of the film, because a lot of its journey is in subtext, it's in nuance, it's in character sort of in these sort of winks towards the camera and throwaway lines that just feels natural. Like these, like in real life, people don't. I mean, maybe they do now. When they just feel like it, they'll just announce, you know, like I'm changing myself. I'm going vegan. Everyone,
Oh my god.
thoughts and prayers, you know. But people don't change like this. They'll just make these sort of infinitesimal decisions, and over time they will stack and compound, and they will amount to something that, you know, like you spend 2 years making these micro decisions that you are a completely different person, right? It just takes a while. Like people, like very rarely in your life, I think this is something I've had a conversation with Randy on some kind of, like very rarely in your life you'll have like these sweeping changes in like that you just change on a like just turn on a dime. Like sometimes you have years where shit just nothing happens in your life, and you just stay the same. And sometimes your arc is gonna extend over 2 decades. You know, where you grow from I don't know, a nihilist to an activist, you know. But in here, you kind of get a similar sort of long journey, but sort of compressed because you don't see it that readily. It's not telegraphed. It's not announced, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's also the power of Rick as a fictional character is that he's a character who's stuck in the past, who's not really living in the present, who does not want to live in the present that he's in, who does not want to help build a better future in the beginning. And I think that's something that goes back to what you were saying, Carson, like the importance of showing this movie now, especially, is that it is a relatable element, I think, for most people probably watching the movie. Everyone in one way or another has experienced heartbreak or pain of some sorts that has stopped them for a period of time from moving on, always living in the past. I think there is value in fictional storytelling. There's value and power in showing fake characters doing just things. And many of the people in this movie do the right thing and do good. And sometimes it's nice to just be inspired by that. I would love to read the feature when you write it about this activism element, because I do think there is so much here that just lifts your spirits up. You mentioned, Jakub, your favorite scene of the movie is
The Marseillaise, yeah.
the Marseillaise when it comes on and it's rousing, and it starts off with a band and then it's just like a full orchestra that comes out of nowhere that's supporting everyone. That's not something that necessarily happens in real life, but it is something that you're watching it and makes you want to be better, be more active, do something more in your life. And I think that's
Oh, this
something that also
happens.
makes this film timeless.
We've had in London a bunch of sort of like, say, um, say like anti-fascist protests, right? And they will be
Mhm.
met with counter protests, or there will be like like, I don't know, keep England white sort of protests, and people will just naturally uh, aggregate to really just run these skinheads off the street, you know. And this is kind
Yeah.
of how you see, because that scene, really, the Marseillaise doesn't really exist in that scene without the song that just precedes it, because that's was like the Wacht am Rhein or something like this. It's essentially a very militarist sort of 19th century military song about imperial domination, right? It's
Yeah.
about, and you hear these people, essentially the newcomers in this in this bar, just take over and discomfort everyone, and get a guy who comes from like outside to say, play this song, play the French anthem, which is, like, if you know the words or you know what they mean, they're about freedom,
Mhm.
you know. So, and actually in this scene, that the best thing is like a lot of these extras were like ex-refugees and whatever. So
Mhm.
so when you see people's tears and the determination on their faces, that's real. That's not pretend. This is the sort of like in your face, like you can see the grit behind it, like how they enunciate these words almost as though they wanted to spit in the face of Nazism. That's not something you can really fake that well. But the meaning of this is not necessarily just like, oh, we're just galvanizing support. No, we're galvanizing against essentially evil, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And also at the time when what the Nazis were up to wasn't necessarily all that well understood. Like there were these guys who, like, there's this guy who was one of the uh, people in Polish government in exile in London, he infiltrated the Warsaw ghetto. He saw the dismantling of it. He saw how people were transported out of the ghetto to concentration camps, and he reported back to Churchill and to Roosevelt and to Anthony Eden, and they were not like, they didn't believe him. They were like, this can't be real, because he was saying like there's industrialized murder going on the occupied land, and they were like, this, they just, it's not that they were saying that he was lying, but they were like, no, 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 like all the reports, the scattershot reports from within the Reich, saying that there are people being burned and gassed by the thousand. They were just saying like, this must be exaggerated, no one would ever do anything like this, because all they knew maybe was the sacking of Nanking, in from 1936 or 37, which was like, oh, this is what they would imagine a genocide would look like, but just not on this scale. And this movie actually just goes into this in just a tiny bit, right? Because what's his name, Laszlo, he says like, oh, I escaped from the concentration camp, and you just get an inkling of how these people are just despicable, vile human beings who just don't give a shit. And this of that Marseillaise scene, it's like you watch this scene standing up. I'm gonna say, like, I watched this movie standing up when this when this thing kind of comes on, you know.
Can I weigh in a little bit on this, because that is a very important moment? And you mentioned extras. There's also people in the cast who are expats, people who could not go back home. So there's a lot of emotion in that scene. But I think it goes back to, it does really tie in well to what we're talking about. There's different ways to resist, and like Jakub said, that has happened. It made me think of two things. One was back when Matthew Shepard was murdered in the United States. It was a hate crime against a gay man that was quite heinous. And of course, during his funeral, there were counter protesters. I think people from certain churches. It might have been Fred Phelps and his followers. They came with signs, to say horrible things, like gay people go to hell or whatever. And the way that counter protesters dealt with it, I thought was pretty ingenious, is that people just showed up and they constructed these huge, like white sheets that were like wings, and they just stood in front of them to block all the signs out and everything, so the people, like family and friends and people who are going to this funeral, would just not see them. It could be quite simple. Or this is funnier. I'm not sure if it's real or not. It was just a social media post that I guess there was a white supremacist gathering on a college campus. I don't know if it was legal or not. And people didn't like it. So some guy showed up. I don't know. College students and high schoolers are some of the funniest people on earth. He just showed up with a boombox and started blasting "The Hobbits Are Going to Isengard," like that remix song from Lord of the Rings. So there's someone just trying to shout about the purity of blood, and you just hear like "the hobbits, the hobbits, the hobbits, the hobbits," just drowning them out, and eventually it dispersed. You can annoy these people, you can get angry and drown them out, you can block them out. There's different ways to do that, and it just goes without saying that even in a film from 1942, they show that you can. It is possible. It's uncomfortable, and there might be consequences. I think that's one of the things that I think Americans are really on the fence about, is kind of, it is like Rick, like, well, I'm just trying to make a living. I'm just trying to survive. I'm just trying to feed my family. And there's certain points it gets to where if it's affecting people around you, or it's getting bad enough where you need to kind of have that moment of realization where it's like, you're not going to be able to do any of that unless you step in. If it's happening to someone else, it's happening to all of you. And I really have that mindset. If someone is being abused or detained or any of that kind of stuff, you should react as if it could happen to you or it's happening to someone that you actually care about, because they will go after you. There's no difference between you and anyone else. It's a complete illusion. And that's what part of what makes Casablanca so powerful.
Mm-hmm. Actually, at the same time, well, like there's sort of the what do you call it? The coldness, or the sort of the idea of the cynical, like, it's none of my business. I just want to be left alone. Like, you can see how this is rationalized, because the price you pay for taking a stance is high. As in, like, well, you have to be prepared that for the eventuality that you may not survive this, right? When you take a stand, because you don't know what's going to happen. And there's no substitute for victory. Again, like, I love when I find myself quoting General MacArthur, but there's no substitute for victory. Like, you can't, like, it's either you win or you die,
Is it Creighton Adams? I don't know if this is a true story or not. And I think it was World War II, where it was like him and his platoon were surrounded by the enemy. And he's like, they've got us surrounded again. The poor
good,
bastard.
You can shoot in all directions.
It's like the poor bastards. Like, they don't even know what they're going up against, even though they're in a losing situation. So
yeah. There's another good quote I remember. Like, there was one reason why I think, is it Navy SEALs or the U.S. Marines would like greet each other with like saying hell, and like at some point they were just like, why is that? Because there was this one sort of, like, I don't know, maverick general or colonel, like they were just doing an amphibious assault somewhere, and they're like, and all their sort of like forces were already there, they're like retreating, and you're just like, what are you doing? Like, oh, we're retreating, sir. Hell, I just got here, so like, this sort of the idea of like, no, like, there's we have to do a job in here, like, I might not get out of this alive, but like, at the same time, like, the idea of, say, bringing it back to Casablanca, the idea of standing up to the Nazis and singing the French anthem and just showing them the sort of display of defiance, carried a risk of, well, maybe they'll round us up and then they'll send us to some kind of a camp. You don't know, because if you don't win, it's a zero-sum game. They will, and they will take care of you, as in, like, they will make you disappear, they will make you suffer, they will punish you for standing up. And then usually in all countries, in all jurisdictions, usually violent or armed insurrection is treated the harshest, right? So like you're not gonna see freedom, or maybe you're not gonna live very long. So there's that risk. And I think the fact that if you can rationalize this or just internalize this of the fear, or like on Rick's behalf, they're saying like, I'm making a decision now that will have ramifications on me and people I employ, because he also takes some, like, there's a scene where he just says, let me close the bar for 2 weeks, but everyone stays on salary. So he's trying to be good to his people, right? That, like, there's going to be like this little community of people who depend on him that he will now have to gamble with, So I don't know. Again, yet another reason to watch Casablanca. It's just such a complex, sort of layered feature. It's fantastic,
One thing about the scene that we're talking about that I love so much when they're singing is, while they do sing the French national anthem, and this is taking place in French Morocco at the time, these people are like not French necessarily. They're refugees from like all over Europe who've found their way to Casablanca, who are trying to get to America. So you also get a lovely little text here about like coming together as a community despite our differences, right? It doesn't matter what country you're from. The point of what they're all fighting against collectively as they sing the song, and just in their everyday life, what they're combating, is so much more universal and is so much more important, that like they all get together on the same page despite their differences. I love that. I think that little bit of chosen community is really empowering, especially at this time where like immigration is a big conversation when it shouldn't be, in a lot of really terrible and negative ways. Having a conversation here where like all these people are trying to immigrate to the United States, all these people are shown in a really positive light. I appreciated that.
I mean, at the same time, you also have to just put it through a filter that even though these people may not have been French, like the French Revolution meant something to a lot of people. And actually, maybe not necessarily immediately, but say the French Revolution began like a sort of a string of national or say smaller uprisings in other countries across Europe that lasted until like mid 1850s. The Spring of Nations. It's just there was all kind of like, remember how we had the Arab Spring? It's just on a longer timeline, where the song, even though they're not French, even though they might not identify with the sort of the French nationality sort of movement, or the sort of the sentiment of feeling fraternity based on nationality, they understand the idea of standing against someone who tries to take your home away from you, or who has taken your home away from you, and you want to drive them out. That's something that's many European nations, many people. This is something that's almost like ingrained in our DNA in many ways. This idea of standing up to bullies, because we've had to do, like specifically like someone who grew up in Poland, like you just always side with the underdog as a Pole, almost just innately. This is something that we already gravitate to, right? Because we've, like, I don't know, the last 300 years of our history is essentially trying to survive against oppressive states trying to just take chunks of our country, right? And then trying to take it back by hook or by crook is almost like in your DNA. The idea, the sort of the French Revolution sort of sentiment is something that many people across Europe would identify, and that's kind of what galvanizes them. This idea of like liberty, fraternity, and that's something that's just supranational, right? And I think I know it's French Morocco and just speaks to the story, but it actually just boils down to being a perfect choice,
Mm-hmm. There's a weird kind of like, especially the beginning. One thing we should address is that, they are in a French colony. It's in Africa. So, all these people are there because that don't actually belong there, and they have taken over that country. But we're very much focused on this hub where, it's basically these people who are traveling through, and it seems like the tables have kind of been turned. These people aren't safe. So we're basically seeing Europeans who aren't safe, and it's usually the other way around. Especially the way our mindset is right now, is anyone who's brown or doesn't look European is in a lot of trouble in America. So, I mean, at the beginning, there's that line to like round up anyone who looks suspicious. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's happening right now. And then, of course, with Ugarte later, the Peter Lorre character, who Peter Lorre is just great. He's welcome. And I see him in anything. And I think this is what a great character actor. This is going to be a great time. But when after his death, which happens off screen, and I feel like in this film particularly, it has a bigger impact not being shown because all you hear is the line, oh, we're deciding whether it's because he tried to escape or he tried to kill himself. That's a narrative that, at least in the United States right now, we're becoming a lot more aware of that this does happen. And it opens with a guy getting shot in front of the embassy, trying to flee. There's so many things that are reflecting like the current environment, and will probably keep reflecting environments all over the world as history goes on. But it is worth noting that it's very interesting because it's Europeans, people who are considered Caucasian, white people, they're fleeing. They're the ones who are trying to get to America, who's, I think at this point, like, well, in real life they were involved with the war, but is Casablanca taking place? Is it taking place before they're involved in the war or after? Now I'm foggy on that. Is that addressed?
Before who's involved in the war?
In America. Like, I know they're fleeing to America. Is Casablanca taking place during 1942 or is it a few years earlier?
No, I think it's
December 41.
December 41. So we just
okay,
about
so
at
it's
the
right
time.
before. Okay.
Right.
I knew there was something in the back of my mind about the period not being in 1942 for sure.
Just for historical context, it's also quite important to remember that, say, it's a French colony, right? And the reason they're using it is because it's because French has capitulated by that time, right? This is governed by the sort of the Vichy sort of let's just say collaborationist government but by dint of being in Africa, they're kind of separated, so they kind of just get to do their own thing while also just waving at the Nazis and saying hello, we're still your friends. So they're kind of in this weird gray middle zone where they get to because people have to like ship off to like Lisbon. That's what they do. Like they go to Lisbon, and from Lisbon they go to America. They don't go to America from Casablanca. This is just like a staging ground for them to travel all the way from Europe. Like they have in the beginning they have to go through the Mediterranean and whatever, right? And it's important to find, because this movie also has like Rick's journey is also reflected on like a national level as well, because Reno at the end, he has like a bottle of Vichy water and he drops it in the bin, almost just to make a stand. Like this is almost like a political sort of piece of messaging that's saying like what's happening in our country, how this country is trying to survive and trying not to be obliterated by this sort of Nazi wave is not reflective of our values. And he like almost just shakes off this yoke of oppression himself, right? And saying like, fuck that Vichy shit, I'm French, goddammit, just Reno just dumping this bottle of Vichy water it makes this sort of definitive sort of stand that like France is more than that. The sort of like the stain of cowardice that's now kind of looming over this. Even now, people say like, how many, like, oh, how can you fight when you're retreating and whatever? Like, no, like France has a very proud history of actually standing up against to that kind of oppression. It dates all the way to the 1700s, and I think the movie kind of just reminds you of this, that like there's there's national pride that's kind of warped into Nazism, and this national pride that's kind of inclusive, because you had you can gather multiple nations under the same umbrella to fight for something that's good, which was the Allied cause at the time. And this is kind of how, again, like another reason why Casablanca should be watched by the 20-somethings now, so that they could spend time doing something useful instead of just shouting self-affirmations on Blue Sky that amount to jack shit.
Hey, there's 20-somethings on this call. Let's be nice, okay? And these are great 20-somethings.
They are great 20-somethings.
Oh my god, you don't like my Blue Sky where I post my affirmations every day?
Oh my god.
Oh, you're on Blue Sky? I haven't joined yet, but I bet that your Blue Sky is wonderful.
Oh my god. Sorry, on Threads. This is where on Threads people do that stuff.
Well, it's if they're people you don't know. I mean, collectively it does kind of seem that way. And the conversation I mentioned last night that I had, it was these parents. One of the things that we were talking about, considering their kid who's 23, obviously Gen Z. I talked to them about it and I said, like, I really don't want Gen Z to make the same mistakes that Gen X did. And it's not because I hate Gen X. These criticisms I'm about to bring up have been posited by Gen X themselves. They really sidelined themselves. A lot of them were to pride in like, they pretty much were like, well, I don't vote. Who cares? I'm not going to do anything. A lot of cynicism. I'm not interested in being civically minded. I don't read the news. Like it just blew my mind. So many Gen X people's like, I've never voted. I don't want to be in public office, and things still worked for them. Like I think it's the last generation where they were able to have a middle class and buy homes and stuff, and then didn't do very much. So as far as kind of keeping,
but now they're on Facebook and they're like happy to be racist.
Yeah, like a lot of people, like I've talked to some Gen Xers and they say like, we're the best generation and we're so liberal and stuff like that. And I have to point out to them, it's just like, no, there's a huge schism. A lot of them are MAGA now. Like, do you know that? Because it's a huge disappointment to me when I figured that out. I really thought that they had their shit together, but even within their own ranks, there's some people are just like, I'm Gen X, and it's like, and I just pay attention to expanding my record collection for the past 20 years and I didn't give a fuck about anything. And now I feel kind of bad about it. And it's just like, yeah, you kind of should. Hopefully you'll do something now. It's a bit too late. Like you have 20 years of just like coasting along and feeling great. And I don't want Gen Z or Gen Alpha to feel discouraged enough or have that learned helplessness to not to feel like, oh, it just doesn't matter and I'm not going to do anything. You have to be galvanized. You have to keep kicking, because it's not like Gen X anymore. You're not going to be able to afford a house, and like, who knows what the job market is going to be like? Who knows that there's going to be another depression or these wars and stuff? You have to be active. You cannot be staring at your phone. It's going to hurt you and it's going to hurt other people. So that I'm hopeful. This is not a criticism or me getting on a soapbox saying, that either generation or any generation is bad. It's just don't do it, because it's not going to lead anywhere good. You do have to dump that Vichy water at some point and say, I've had enough, and I'm actually going to, just like you said, do something.
Do something. This goes on a t-shirt. Do something.
Anything. Well, not anything. Do something.
Anything. Do something. Move your ass. But I like how the Gen X sort of, we're the last good, and just like, that sort of like cliche quote of like, hard times create good men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. They're the weak men created by good times, and they're like, we're the best generation. Yeah, because you had it fucking easy, guys.
Well, it's the same with baby boomers. There's a doc I watched earlier this week. I'll recommend it. It's The Spirit of 45. Yeah. And maybe you guys saw that on Letterboxd. I wrote like a short review about it, but it's very much about that generation that came out of World War II, where everything was wrecked and just leveled, and they had to basically rebuild their society. It focuses on the UK, so the scope is pretty small, and then it just talks about how everything became dismantled, by the 80s, especially with Thatcher. And I mean, that happened in the US as well. So I'd recommend that as far as a reminder of people who go through something that's awful, which I think is what we're going through right now. I think we might have the same opportunities where it's like, it got really bad, but we can wrest back some control and rebuild again. Yeah. There needs to be guardrails put in to remind people so that doesn't happen again, where it's like, well, yeah, it was so like, we're so great. And, we had all these things. It's like, yeah, because they were handed to you. And now you're making sure that it's not handed out to anyone else. That's a problem.
Just saying, when it's focused on Britain, imagine Britain was leveled after the war, and then one of the first things they did, that was a Labour government, by the way, was it Clement Attlee? They after the war, they essentially just they came with this dream of like, how about we create a healthcare service that's free for everyone?
Yes, exactly.
How about that? And they did.
Yes.
And then now like Gen X's goes like, our NHS. It's like, you did nothing. You did nothing. You just keep voting for Tories, people, like, who want to dismantle this thing. Like, what are you people doing? But like the sort of the pride and glory of the sort of the British welfare state, just prove that you can care for everyone on some level. You can provide for everyone. Is a result of these people coming back from the war, dusting themselves off, and going like, right, where do we start?
Jobs and housing. It's really, I'd say, when we're talking about showing Casablanca to younger people, I think not that the spirit of 45 is as exciting, but it shows you like that it's possible. And there's another doc, I think it was the New Deal for Artists, that kind of examined Roosevelt's that certain things he put into place in order to make things easier for people to work or just get through the hell that the country was going through at the time. And that all became dismantled as well. It's so depressing. But it shows you that it is possible. Things come together, they fall apart. That's human history. But I think where we are right now, we pretty much have to get in the mindset. It's like, let's build something, or let's do something and at least make it better until, it falls apart again.
I mean, The Spirit of 45 is directed by Ken Loach, I'm seeing, and I would say I think pretty much any Ken Loach film, putting it in front of young people would probably also be a good suggestion as far as building empathy and understanding of the world.
Building hatred towards the conservatives, yes.
Oh, yeah. There's this amazing meme where it's...
gets the job done.
With Margaret Thatcher.
We were talking about Looney Tunes earlier. There's this meme I found somewhere. I'll see if I can find it, and I'll put it with the list I'll put together for this episode. But it's a picture of... I think it's like Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny kind of like in front of a sign that says like rabbit season and then duck season, and they're arguing, and then it just suddenly says Elmer season, Elmer Fudd the Hunter, and they both kind of turn and look off screen. It's like, that's where we need to kind of get, because there's so much infighting as far as like, we're both being hunted, and it's just like we need to kind of turn against the people who are making
There's more of us than there is of them,
Exactly. I know, and that scares them.
Maybe circling back, bringing this to Casablanca, I will say, actually, if anyone wants more conversation on the NHS, go check out our 28 Years Later, the Bone Temple review. We got deep into the NHS over there.
Talk about... Okay, I need to listen to this because I think I missed out on your conversation.
Well, Jack has all the insight. It's not Carson and I. It's basically, it's like a crash course in how healthcare works in the UK. So
yes. No, Jack definitely had a lot to say, so I would recommend that conversation. But maybe circling back to Casablanca, we've been very positive, and I think that's good. I'm curious, is there anything in this film that you three dislike or have on the negative list, or is it just like pure positivity with this one? And it's okay if there's nothing. This is not
kind of
required.
hard to say.
Yeah, it is a tough one.
Like this would be like if we were doing this on Gems, and it's like, well, what's on your bottoms list, Jakub? Like, I don't know. Remember that quote, "Play it again, Sam," doesn't exist. That's kind of there's a lot of like lore built into this, and like in terms of like, what am I going to fault this movie for? Like there's an element of like weird pacing or convenient sort of wrap up towards the end, and you're like, yeah, this still is a movie that's like people still were figuring out how to tell stories in visual terms, and even with that, it's like way ahead of its time, So yeah, it's kind of hard to fault it for much, apart from there's a few conveniences here and there, and maybe there's like an element of like, I don't know, some things are a little bit dated here and there, but other than that, it's hard to say now, unless you guys have like, Nicolò, do you have like a laundry list of grievances?
I doubt it. I really doubt it. I mean, you're asking the person who loves it the most.
The poster isn't great.
I kind of agree, depending on what poster it is. Yeah, I see that.
Like the theatrical classical one where you have Humphrey Bogart with a gun. It's like, we need to sell the movie. Humphrey Bogart with a gun. It shoots it just once in the last scene, but that's it. That's a nice one, Carson.
I like this one, yeah.
There's some good alternative ones that fans have made over the years.
But the ones, the original ones, they just like go to the poster department at the Warner Brothers, and it's like, we need a poster for this. Like, what is this? Oh, it's a love story. Okay, I think I got it. Oh, Bogart's in it. Like, give him a gun. Cool. We know what to do. Thanks. We don't need any more.
Faces. That's all you need. That's the poster.
Yeah. It was simple back then. I kind of a weakness for the posters like from several decades earlier. I think like during the 1910s, these hand painted posters, so beautiful. And then you think about 100 years later, like the 2000s into 2010s, with all those horrible
God.
photoshops on white backgrounds. Ugh, awful.
I'll tell you this much: like, if you like cool posters, there's a whole sort of like cottage industry of Polish posters from the 80s where they were doing their, like, if you look at posters for like Crocodile Dundee or like The Thing from the 80s, made by these sort of Polish sort of like, I don't know, avant-garde sort of artists, because they were just doing this because they're so cool. It's
All
like you can almost start
right,
like a
yeah.
I've
Twitter
seen these.
account to just start posting them, and they're so cool looking, fantastic, you know. And then like some of the originals, they go for like for massive amounts of money, you know. And but yeah, it's yeah, it's just
I guess all in
that's
all, we don't. I mean, if we could just say like the poster's a problem. I don't know. Like, there has to be tension in the film and miscommunications. That's something that Jakob and Randy and I talked about in the Birdcage. People have problems with the plot, and it's like that plot needs to be there because there needs to be misunderstandings that cause the comedy. Like some of the things between Rick and Ilsa could have been solved, like just like saying like a few sentences, or maybe just saying a little bit more. But that tension is so much a part of the film. Like it's part of the pleasure and pain of watching a doomed romance. So that could be a complaint, but it's a slight one, and it would be really splitting hairs at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm not shocked that there's a lot of lack of negatives here. I mean, I think this is a pretty great film. Before we get into our Best Picture scorecard, I'll just turn it over generally. Is there anything left with Casablanca before we get into the scorecard, which I think will push the conversation into certain directions? Is there anything left before we get there that we want to say? Nick, I mean, this is also your final chance to kind of make a claim here to get some of these scores up to where you want them to be. So, like, is there anything left to get to?
Not really. I just think this conversation has made me, I don't want to say love the movie even more, but this has made me appreciate it under different angles, especially on the conversation about the political side of things. It's a timeless film. I think all the best films should always have something more to say. They can work in a shallow way, in like a, not shallow, but like surface level way. Level one of analysis. Like, this is the story. It's a nice story, but I think this is one of those films that manages to work historically back when it was made. It still works right now. I hate that it still works right now, that it's still relevant in so many ways. It should not be relevant. We should have this way past us. I remember watching this movie. I never thought when I first saw it we get to the point where we're at now in history, and in terms of thinking some people would welcome, are welcoming Nazism and fascism's return. But
Have
yeah,
you seen
here we
Christian
are.
Petzold's Transit?
I have, yeah.
I think this is kind of like we're looking at, I don't know, in Europe and America, I suppose, like this is the reality of what we're looking at. I don't know if you've never seen Christian Petzold's Transit, that's exactly the realistic sort of portrayal of what's going to happen when you have to run for your life from a Nazi regime, you know.
Indeed,
Just saying,
indeed.
great film to watch, but holy shit, it's really scary.
I really echo your point, Nick. I think there's been on Twitter, I've seen a lot of people post like, I'm really sick of living through historical events, which I feel. I'm really sick of watching these older films throughout history and just being like, why are we still here? Like, why are we still, like last week, Hillary, we talked about the house that Jack built. It was like, wow, I cannot believe like we're still here in so many ways with this. We talked about this. I just watched Cabaret, and it's like, oh my God, I just cannot believe watching these films. And you're like, oh, this is, exactly, we're in this exact same spot. God.
Yeah, like you see Cabaret, you see the sort of the scene where they sing "Tomorrow Belongs to Us," and you're like, can we please agree? Then you're like, when you're allowing all these far right assholes do their thing and hang their flags, that's exactly what we're doing. Just like putting fingers in your ears and saying la 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 la, and then and being surprised when they drive you out of your house into a cattle car, and then that's it. You're gone, done, curtains. Oh my God, so timely, so timely. And you know what? Like we were talking about Cabaret like years ago on Gems, and that my sort of proxy for what's happening right now. And in Cabaret now, it's like, remember when during the was it Myanmar sort of takeover, like the junta took over, there was this viral video of this woman doing like some kind of an like, I don't know, some kind of like a dance routine in front of a camera, and she's doing this, in front of, because she's doing like a dance class. Meanwhile, behind her, like black SUVs pull up with guns and just take over, and she's still just doing like, this is us, like doing TikTok dances while the world burns. Just distracting
Some
ourselves.
of us, for sure, absolutely.
Some of us. No, I mean, as a millennial, like, I hate that I have to live through historical events. I'm sick and tired of them at this point. But like, yeah, that's kind of how you feel, like just completely helpless as well. But anyway.
Yeah, I'm sick of feeling like I'm living through Cavalcade. But with that, let's get to our ClapperCast Best Picture scorecard. Towards the end of every episode, we do this, FYI, for everyone at home, just for fun. If you disagree with us on a take, it doesn't matter. This is all for fun. We have 5 different categories. We'll go through. We'll all give our opinions and give our scores. We'll take the average, and that is what we're going to roll with today. Starting out, and these are 5 categories, theoretically, that make a great Best Picture winner. First off, a Best Picture winner should be inventive, whether it's in narrative, whether it is in production. Something about the film should be pushing the art in the world of cinema forward. Hillary, I'll turn over to you first for inventiveness. Where are you on this category?
I think that was the hardest category for me as far as inventiveness, because we talked about how the visuals were so effective. And I think of it more as like a crystallization of film language, as far as like the film language in this film, not to be redundant, is just used perfectly as far as to tell the story. But while watching it, it's kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It's like I mentioned that it was seamless, and Jakub said like the director definitely isn't getting in the way or imposing any of a particular style. So I put it at a 4, because it is something that its crystallization ended up affecting so many other movies, whether it was serious or it was parody. It definitely set a standard for something, but I can't think of anything in particular that hasn't already been used before. It's just used very well. So I'm leaving it at a 4. It would be a 5 if it was a bit flashier, but I have to have some sort of curve or like some give for other films that do more.
Nick?
I second everything that Hillary just said. I also gave it a 4. For the same exact reasons. I think it's a great film for everything we discussed, but it doesn't have that extra inventiveness to it that blows you away.
Jakub?
For me, the inventiveness is kind of mostly cultural, because it's kind of weirdly one of those movies of the moment. Even if, like, I know this was kind of like, wow, tied to its release was tied to a historical event and whatever, right? But if you think about, like, there's a western, there's like an Ernst, is it like an Ernst Lubitsch sort of like a trifle? It's a comedy, right? There's a lot of escapism, as in like, let's look the other way. It's none of my business. I'm not sticking my neck out for nobody kind of movies. I think maybe The Watch on Rhine, I think this is kind of like a very anti-fascist film, but I haven't seen it. This is Howard Wallace's was nominated for this. But I kind of would say that a film as from this vantage point, I think 4 would be not enough. But then again, it's not going this sort of like, well, it exists in a world where Citizen Kane exists, where the inventiveness bar has been raised, right? Like formally, right? So I want to say, can we do halves?
Sure.
So 4.5.
Okay.
I debate about that as well. Like, is it 3.5 a thing? But then I thought it's just going to get weirder and weirder. So I'm sticking with whole numbers for now. Who knows what will be.
Adding to the humiliation ritual of me trying to do math on a podcast. Thank you, Jakub, for that.
No worries.
We're going to call it
like 12, 16.
No, literally.
This is a 14.23. What?
No, literally. It's like, okay, sure, buddy. Okay, so for me, I'm not worried about this film overall score, to be very clear. So I feel like taking it category by category, inventiveness for me, probably the weakest category here for this film. Like, for me, and I appreciate, Hillary, what you're saying about the crystallization of using different genres and using different filmmaking techniques. For me, there's not a lot here that just like looking at an individual element isn't already done elsewhere in cinema. Probably not as done as well as this. I mean, this is a masterclass of that. For me, I would struggle to find too much that I would say is super inventive. So I went all the way down to a 2. Sorry, everyone. But again, I category by category, I'm not very worried about this film overall. That brings us, I'm going to round it to a 3.5 total for inventiveness. Next up, we have viewing quality. Oh my, it's going to be fun.
This is me trying to do my George Takei. Oh my.
Oh my gosh. I'm worried about all the Casablanca stands online. Little do I know. They're here, right here on the call with me, going to attack me. Viewing quality, best picture film should be able to be watched. That should have a good viewing quality. Nick, I'll turn it over to you first. What number are you at? Where are we?
5. Easy 5. Timeless. It's a movie that I could enjoy as a 14-year-old who was loving cinema, but never in a way that was too deep. I love it even more now as an adult. I do think it's one of those movies that kind of everyone can enjoy and love, except the 1 or 2 people Jakub found on Letterboxd. You know.
That's true. It is in black and white. Keep that in mind, everyone.
I know, right?
Jakub, where are you for viewing quality?
Fell asleep 0, you know. No, 5. Come on, like it's a very easy watch. Like 80 something years on, it's a movie that doesn't feel. It's a timeless experience in many ways. So yeah, I want to say a 5. Yeah.
Yeah, I almost went with a 5, but I chose a 4 because I would be curious if they. I know, just as a caveat, like I love black and white films. Black and white cinematography is absolutely gorgeous, but there is a part of me that's curious about what would this have looked like in color. So there is like a little bit of push there as far as I don't think it would have changed things too drastically, but as far as like the viewing experience, like what else could have been done? It's like it could have been in color. I don't know if it would have been better, but it's still pretty high up there. So a 4.
Well, when I watched this thing on my phone like this, it wasn't like the cinematography clearly wasn't optimized to watch it off Netflix off my phone. So that transition for sure.
Movies on your fucking telephone.
I was going to say David Lynch has entered the call.
I'm with you, Hillary. I gave it a 4. It's a very easy watch. This is not a difficult film to throw on and enjoy. Very like also with so many of these classic films, we kind of talk about the memes that format around them, but I feel like also there's normally some type of like critical pushback where I'm sure we can all find someone who's like Citizen Kane actually is overrated and actually is a 1-star film. I really feel like nobody.
Yeah,
sure. Not the point. Point A, point B. I don't see anyone do that with Casablanca. I don't see anyone looking at this retroactively and being like, actually, guys, this film sucks, and here's why. It really has held the test of time. Which I guess we'll get to a little bit, but I would say viewing quality is good.
There's a lot of the sort of the first part. This film sucks, but no one will give you why.
Yeah, when people just say it sucks, or they're like, the main thing is like because it's black and white.
Oh, it's boring. It's black and white.
Or it's boring, or it's slow, and it's just like, well, I was talking to a friend about this recently, where I was watching Halloween with some people, and I could just tell they were angry. Like, I came here to see tits. I want to see someone get stabbed in the tits.
Not a single tit in this one, by the way. Like,
and then I said, in 20 years, it's like that's the first thing you see. So it depends on like what you're looking for. If you want tits and explosions or people getting stabbed, like Casablanca.
Tits in Halloween. What are they talking about?
These people were impatient because if you remember the movie, it takes like 40 minutes for it to start ramping up, and these people wanted to see it in the first 10 minutes. You know, and it wasn't happening.
You're kind of talking me down here on viewing quality. Like, yeah, it could have tits in the first 10 minutes.
I know, and a lot more death.
Right? Should we drop? Like,
no.
It was my first year of college that I'm talking about, where that kind of happened. So
again, kind of like an inventive circumvention of the Hays Code, because there's a scantily clad dancer in one of the scenes, but you can see her just about like she's behind the pillar, but what you see is her shadow.
Mm-hmm.
She's just like weaving and but you only see her for like half a second when the camera pans away, and you can kind of sort of catch the glimpse of the actual person because she's kind of hidden away, and you can see the sort of the shadow of this woman dancing, just to give you this sort of the vibe of a Moroccan, like a dance, like a nightclub, you know. But you can see how, in the 40s they're like, oh, we have to do this. Like, I need to have a woman dancing, and no, because people will get boners, and we don't want boners in cinemas.
No, a horny bunk for that. Absolutely not. Luckily We all think it's pretty viewable. We're at a 4.5 for viewing quality. Jakub, representation of year. Best Picture winner should represent the year of release. How strong is Casablanca for representing
The
the
year
year?
of release? I don't. I think I need to go and see how many other films from 1942 I've seen. I don't think I have too many though. So can I pass for now? And while
Yeah.
I
Okay.
just read.
We'll come back to Jakub.
Okay.
I will go. I think this is very representative of the year. Talking about politics, talking about where we are in war, this American ideal that we've talked about. I think this is going to match a lot of the feeling and the vibe, both for the individual human and just society as a whole. I went full 5 with this. I think this is a really, really wonderful representation of the year
Yes.
and kind of where society was at. Nick?
Same 5 for the same reasons. I also thinking of the. I've not seen all of the Best Picture nominated films, of course, of that year, not yet, but it is the best one of the ones that I've seen. And it just the historical relevancy of coming out in that year.
Yeah.
Amazing. 5.
Hillary?
Same. I gave it a 5, and I did make a short list of films that were coming out, either that were eligible to be nominated or came around the same time. Like last week when we did The House of Jack Built, I mentioned The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, once again an Archer's film. A very interesting war message as far as, like the older generation still contributing but also getting out of the way. To Be or Not to Be, the Ernst Lubitsch film, that also came out, very war influenced. The More the Merrier, which was nominated, but it kind of gave more of a domestic perspective about, as far as like the housing crisis and certain sacrifices that citizens were making in order for things to work and to get through the war. Strangely enough, like The Magnificent Ambersons, I made a note of that kind of in relation to the life and death of Colonel Blimp, as far as like coming up with a story showing like the old ways are dying out and we're going into a really dark period because, it's things are just not the same anymore. Unfortunately, we don't even have the actual cut of that film. We never will. And then the last one I made a note of was The Talk of the Town, which is it's like there's very interesting conversations between the Cary Grant character and, I want to make sure. Yes, Ronald Coleman. There's so many guys with R names. I was afraid I was going to say the wrong actor's name, but there's parallels to this in Casablanca. Although it's a comedy, as far as just like Cary Grant plays someone who's like, I'm an activist. I'm a person who's trying to change things, and Ronald Coleman plays a judge who's like, well, we follow the law, we don't intervene, kind of sitting by the sidelines and galvanizing him to get involved. So I think as far as the year, this particular period, and just glancing at what was nominated, along with Casablanca, there is a lot of stuff related to the war. There's a lot of stuff that's related to, I don't know, patriotism. I know that seems like a poisonous word these days because it means so many different things, but there was more. It was like a unification. That's the one thing that I think that we're missing now, is that it seemed like, at least during this time, everyone was on the same page and willing to make sacrifices, and now everything's fragmented. So that's my window into that year. A lot of interesting stuff to watch that I'll put on my little list for people to supplement watching Casablanca with.
Jakub, we're back to you. We've gone around the circle.
Back to me. I'm looking at this, and then how representative is of the release year, because out of the best picture nominees, I have seen Heaven Can Wait and the Oxbow Incident very, 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 very many years ago. But I want to say this is a movie that I want to say Hollywood needed, rather than the one that sort of represented the lot in many ways. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of escapism around, like a lot of American exceptionalism, or like Superman serials are out, right? And and a lot of like, look the other way. Here's a farce. Here's a comedy. Come on, because I think The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp is like 1943. But yeah, so it's kind of difficult for me to gauge when stuff kind of came out, but kind of right. And I really like that movie, by the way. So if you've never seen The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, just watch it. It's fantastic.
The title sounds so lame. Like, take it from me.
It's great.
Where it's just like, what is this? I don't think I just imagined it was going to be about a tiresome person, and it's so touching. And the makeup in this film is insane. it's
Yep.
worth watching for the makeup alone. So
It's like we talked
Yeah.
about the Great Waldo Pepper last year, and it's like, what is this about? Oh, it's amazing! It's like the final reckoning or whatever. It's just like these people doing these wild stunts everywhere. But yeah, I want to say I'm probably gonna go with a 5 because it's not necessarily representative of a trend, but this is a movie that's essentially like almost like showing that Hollywood hasn't really lost its way completely. So yeah, I want to give it some props.
And I believe in this series, that's the first time we've got a category that's a perfect 5 across the board. So congrats to Casablanca. Nice. Next up, Legacy. A Best Picture winner should have a good legacy. I think we're about to, my prediction is probably repeat that perfect 5 because is Casablanca considered by many to be one of the best films ever made? The legacy of this is, I really genuinely cannot think of how a legacy could probably get better than this. It is referenced all the time, recognized all the time, pretty heavily seen. Yeah, for me it's a 5, like the easiest 5 I've ever given.
Same here.
Jakub? Okay, Nick is a 5. Jakub?
Yep. Look, just wanted to throw it out there with inspiring filmmakers to not necessarily remake, or essentially just it's a movie that people don't want to touch as far as the remake is concerned, but they are willing to engage with it. The Good German, Play It Again Sam, Blue Moon last year. There are movies in conversation. There are plenty of movies in conversation with Casablanca, and at the same living in sort of perfect sort of deference of its greatness. That's a mark of essentially like a pantheon film that people don't want to, really mess with, because you don't want to remake a movie like this and just, like give it to like, I don't know, Uwe Boll.
That's true.
But you know what I mean? Like you don't want to, I don't know, tarnish its legacy by trying to redo this story, or but yeah, it's a hard 5.
Hillary?
Yes, just to echo what Jakub was saying, it's something that can't be replicated. And I was just thinking to myself, well, who do you get to just for the Bogart role? Who
Ryan Gosling?
No, please, no. I don't understand Ryan Gosling. That's another episode. We'll have to get into that.
Chalamet.
Oh, hold
please,
on.
Please,
let us go.
No.
Jacob Elordi?
Jacob
no.
No,
I don't dislike any of these people really, but it's just like they're not like Bogart was such an individual.
Alden
person.
Ehrenreich.
Alden Ehrenreich.
Maybe.
Good shout.
Hold on.
Austin Butler.
We're getting there.
Give him a cigarette and a bottle of whiskey.
You put Paul Mescal in there, maybe.
We can keep going.
Yeah. Anyway, let's just
Josh O'Connor.
Yeah. Just like go for Paul Mescal's co-stars.
I live in fear of opening a can of tuna because I worry Josh O'Connor's in it.
What? What does that mean?
Excuse me?
You don't know what that means?
No, I don't know what that means. Is this a UK thing?
No, this may be a Polish thing. As in, like,
okay,
it's definitely a Polish thing.
When something or someone's everywhere, people will be just like, "I'm afraid of opening a can of tuna."
They're showing up everywhere.
They're showing up everywhere.
Yeah, that's definitely the thing.
New vocal stem unlocked, everyone.
Yeah, one thing I will add to the list here is I mentioned Louise Brooks earlier because she was in Pandora's Box, but she wrote a really interesting essay about Humphrey Bogart because she knew him, and it makes you like him a little bit less, but he's still a great actor. I'd say it's definitely worth looking into.
Was he an asshole on set?
No, it's not necessarily that kind of thing.
Like
it's just
Chase.
just kind of an asshole. I don't want to make it sound like, oh, there's allegations of him doing something terrible. It's just kind of like, she kind of points out like, he's kind of a phony. And she's like, because I knew him before he was famous. It's really, it's great. It's absolutely fantastic. She's such a great writer.
We could start the cancel Bogart movement though.
We
did.
We
should do that.
Yeah.
Get ready.
Let's not play with fire, please.
The knock to the legacy, I have to say one thing. When I heard Ingrid Bergman saying like, can you play this song for me? You know that tune, na 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 na, and I'm like, I'm hearing Corina Longworth's sort of.
I
intro.
knew it.
I'm like, oh really?
Oh,
I didn't think about that, but you're right. There's a lot of that that's kind of in the back of your head now. Okay. So I should give my score. I don't think I set the number, but it is 5. I mean, it's basically, the dialogue, the images, the songs that are playing it. The fact that it's shown up in parody. This is a film you've seen even if you haven't seen it yet. And that's a very powerful legacy to have, just in general. So definitely a 5.
Great. Moving on to our final category. How deserving is the film of winning Best Picture? A big category to discuss. Hillary, I'll turn over to you first.
5.
Where are you? 5? Okay.
Just 5. It deserves
Jakub,
it.
I'm seeing...
There's a 5.
He's holding up 5. I'm surprised he's not holding up 10. He's just like, can I go up to 10?
I can do the 10.
Okay.
I'm going to include my toes. It'll be a 20 now.
Look, the one thing is I think the Oxbow incident is pretty incredible. That's my one issue where I think,
True.
you know, I love the guy, love that film, but this is pretty undeniable, isn't it? I'm going to go 4.5. I just have to hold that 0.5 for Oxbow, but like, this is pretty fantastic.
I think if anything, a takeaway for people listening to this episode is go watch the Oxbow incident.
Oh, please.
And The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp.
Yeah,
Life and Death of
Colonel Blimp
watch
sounds
that
like a lame
series.
guy, but he actually rocks, you know? So you gotta check it
While
out.
you're at it, just go on a Powell and Pressburger.
Yes.
binge.
That's what I've been
Archer
doing. I
Mile.
like a lot of them. It's this, I guess Scorsese and Schoonmaker made this documentaries on
Great.
Canopy. And I
Great
ended up just
one.
watching all of them. Because, I mean, I'd seen some of them.
She was
Like the Red
married to
Shoes
Michael
and
Powell,
stuff.
wasn't she?
Yeah, exactly. So they're just basically, you know, trying to promote the work of their, you know, spouse and
Besties.
friend. They're so good. A lot of them are they're excellent filmmakers. I can't say I like all of them, but there's a solid 5 in there. It's just like, especially the 49th Parallel, which I
Yeah.
noted earlier. That one really blew my mind. I'm so glad that I was able to see that. It was a blind spot for me.
So just because we're going to round it anyway, I guess I'll just change it to a 5 because it doesn't really matter. So that brings us, well, it rounds up to a 5 anyway, so whatever. Total points, that brings us up to 23 out of 25, beating Wings by 1 point to take the leaderboard. So
Ding dong.
congratulations, Casablanca. You can't get much better than this, but I'm curious, will we find a film to beat this, or is this going to be our champion for the rest of the series? We'll have to see. I think moral of this, well, hold on.
No.
Look, I'm not going to say Crash needs to be reanalyzed. I'm just saying Crash, maybe if looking back at it, has some points.
Oh
True.
my god! I mean,
Yeah,
that was very much of the moment.
Sign me up for
Yeah.
Crash because I haven't shat on a movie in a long while. No, sorry, I have because we just did Popeye.
Oh,
We
yeah,
have the
I saw
greatest
that
show
review.
on earth. That film inspired Spielberg, so maybe there's some power in there we're not considering. We don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's just going to make us
Oh,
lose
the
all
greatest
respect
show
for
on earth. Please
Spielberg.
don't. I'm not coming for the greatest show on earth.
No,
I'm
you're on
subjecting
it.
myself
You're
to-
required to be there.
Oh no!
You're
We're coming to
hours
your
of-
house.
You still gonna clown
You
that?
will watch that circus for 90 minutes uncut, and you will enjoy it. Okay.
Hey, he dodged the Great Ziegfeld. By the way, that was an episode I thought about being on, but I thought I can't sit through that again, even though I like some of the actors, and I just couldn't do it. I'm so sorry.
No, you actually made the right choice. It made me realize, like, oh, I really can't just pick a random Best Picture winner because you will get the Great Ziegfeld, and I literally was like, Jack, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't know what we were signing up for.
Some
it was
of them
bad.
are landmines, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Legitimately.
the Ziegfeld is probably not going to be the biggest landmine. I think it's just one where you watch and you think, like, that was very much of its time, and there's not very much I can do with it now.
Yeah.
It just didn't work. There's going to be ones that are more infuriating, I'm sure. You know, there's going to be bigger landmines.
I will say, I think I'm supposed to be in coming over for the best years of our lives, and then that one, spoiler alert, I really loved. So you know.
Well, spoiler alert. So our next entry of this, if you do want to keep following this series, next month we're jumping 3 years ahead to the best years of our lives.
Oh right, there you
William
go.
Wyler, pretty iconic early director, seen a lot in these Academy Awards. So we're going to check out his Best Picture winner. So we'll see where that ranks next time. With that said, thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. Thank you everyone at home for listening. Loving this series, and I'm happy that we are back to like good films. You know, we went through Cavalcade, we went through the Great Ziegfeld. Just timing wise, we had to get through some of these poor ones, but I think now, hopefully for a while, we're like on the track upward. You know, hopefully films people have heard about / somewhat enjoy. So with that, let's find where we can find everyone online. Nick, where can we find your work online?
You can find me on most social media at Nicolò97. You can watch my short films on YouTube and Vimeo at Enjoy the Movies. And you can listen to my own podcast where all of these three lovely people have been guests on recently, called Anatomy of an Adaptation, where we look at book and film adaptations.
Lovely. Jakub?
Oh, well, you can find me privately as Jakub Flasz on Letterboxd and Blue Sky, but mostly I'm active on flashonfilm.com, FLASZ onfilm.com, where I write stuff, and also at Flash on Film on various social media, now including TikTok and YouTube. I started my YouTube journey, so go on Flash on Film on YouTube and just listen and look at me rant into a camera from a sedentary position, unopposed. so you can do that. And then, and then just, I suppose this is what happens on YouTube. Just throw shit in my direction as well, because why not? It's a very cultured environment, but yeah, that's kind of where I live personally. And also, Uncut Gems podcast is the show I run together with Randy, and where we talk about movies no one really else wants to talk about most of the time. So uncutgemspodcast.com is the website where you can go to find out all the episodes. And also check out our Patreon, patreon.com/uncutgemspod. $3 a month gets you access to everything we have, including like hundreds of bonus podcasts at this point. So you could just sign up and just listen to our beautiful voices until you die, So,
I'm sure it feels that way.
Thousands upon thousands of hours of just conversations about weird shit.
Highly recommend it. Mm-hmm. And of course, link in the description below for both Anatomy of an Adaptation and for Uncut Gems, two fantastic podcasts, not only with the great people here, but just some great guests other than that, Randy and such, who've been on the podcast before. Cannot recommend those enough. Hillary, where can we find you online?
Well, I do not have a podcast, so that's the difference. You can find me on Letterboxd under the name Degelle, Degelle. If you go there, there's a link to campsite.bio that'll take you to a link tree. I do run a blog, same name. I'm currently writing a piece that relates to the Birdcage episode last month on Uncut Gems, which is about the sissy archetype as queer defiance. That's been fun to write. And next month, I think I'll be doing some video editing projects that will be fun. There was something else I was going to mention that had to do with promoting something I was doing, and now my mind is completely blank, and this is very embarrassing. Oh yeah, one of the new things I'm doing is whenever I appear on one of these episodes is that I make a miniature list on Letterboxd that you can look up. In this case, it would be ClapperCast, ClapperCast Casablanca, and you'll see all the films I mentioned and links to the strange things I talked about. Sometimes when it's in a podcast episode, people talk about things and I have no idea what the visuals are or what it's referring to. So it's a fun little research project for me to put together these mini lists, and maybe people will find them by chance and tune into these episodes. So hopefully I'm getting more listeners for these podcasts as well.
Love it. And we appreciate those lists, Hillary. I know it's always fun to go on Letterboxd and read through and click on the links and see what you reference. As far as here on the podcast, you can obviously follow us both on YouTube and on Spotify. If you want bonus episodes, we have monthly bonus episodes on both platforms that I would highly recommend. Recently, myself and Jack, we looked at Godzilla versus Space Godzilla. Super fun to talk about some classic Godzilla. If you like our Best Picture Rewind series, I know we kind of dunked on it, but still I think the episode on The Great Ziegfeld and also the episode on Cavalcade were both incredibly worthy. Hillary, we just looked at The House That Jack Built. So that's all stuff that we recently released that I'd recommend. Coming up soon, Hillary, we will be discussing Sanjuro, which I'm very excited about. Mm-hmm. We're going to celebrate Star Wars Day by talking about The Force Awakens, because there's no fandom that is more welcoming to opinions and discussions than the Star Wars fandom. So cannot wait for that. And as well as just various new releases and old releases being discussed. As we said, next month, Jakub will be back to discuss the best years of our lives. But with that, that's going to close it for today's episode. Again, thank you everyone for listening, for supporting the podcast, for watching. Thank you everyone who was here joining me today, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.